have before you a brief profile of our esteemed guest lecturer of today, Professor Praveen Agarwal. Professor Praveen Agarwal has been working in the Department of Emergency Medicine for the past 32 years at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi, and is currently serving as Professor and Head, Department of Emergency Medicine at AIIMS, New Delhi itself. Professor Agarwal has been awarded the World Health Organization Fellowship in Toxicology in USA and is a member, scientific body, Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission. He is also co-chairman, Data Safety Monitoring Board for Clinical Trials Involving Stem Cells, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. He is also the Vice President, Academic College of Emergency Experts in India and Chief Editor of the Journal of Emergencies, Trauma and Shock. In 2011, he was awarded the prestigious Fellowship of the Academic College of Emergency Experts in India. Professor Agarwal has 188 publications to his credit in various national and international journals. He has authored textbooks in the fields of toxicology, emergency medicine, and written 35 chapters in various books. Professor Praveen Agarwal is a member of the Institute Ethics Committee, IIT Delhi, and a member subcommittee, Institute Ethics Committee, AIIMS, New Delhi, and a member Ethics Committee of IIT Delhi for ethical consideration involved in research on human subjects. Currently, Professor Agarwal is the principal investigator of two ICMR and Department of Health Research, Government of India funded research projects, and a co-investigator of one project. So we extend a hearty welcome to Professor Praveen Agarwal, and we eagerly wait for his presentation. Professor Agarwal, please, may we have it
all. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Professor Mansi, for the kind introduction. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Srimati Krishna, Registrar Academic, Professor Mansi, dear colleagues, scholars, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank I will extend my thanks to the SH Health University for inviting me to this important area, which you said is second in the lead. I was thinking of presenting something related to emergencies, but then I was told that there's a mix of audience, both professional and public. So therefore, I changed my topic to emergencies, the first aid in emergency medical medicine, or first aid in medical emergencies. So what is first aid? First is the assistance or the actions provided by a person to another person who is ill or injured before a definitive medical emergency becomes available to him. The responsibility of first aid lies with the non-medical personnel who is present at the site of accident or at the site of injury or at the site of illness. It should be provided with those persons, only those who know how to give the first aid. If you are uncertain about certain actions, it is better to avoid the first aid because it may be potentially harmful to the patient. I would also like to say that it is something difficult for a trained person also, even doctors also, to provide first aid to a person with some illness or injury. So before I discuss the topic of first aid in medical emergencies, I'll just brief about the Good Samaritan law, which was passed by the Supreme Court in 2016. The background was that people were afraid to help a victim of road crash because they were afraid to go to the police station repeatedly. They were afraid to go to the courts repeatedly. So in 2016, the Supreme Court passed a law, which is Good Samaritan law. So a Good Samaritan is a person who is in good faith, without expectation of any payment, any reward, and without any duty of care. Voluntarily comes forward to administer immediate assistance or action to the emergency care to a person with an emergency medical condition. So any person who has seen an accident, who has seen an ill person, or who passes by a person who is already injured, can act as a Good Samaritan. So he can take the person to a hospital, and the important thing is that he would be allowed to leave the hospital immediately without asking any questions. If he wants to say, he can deliver, he can say his name, he can give his personal addresses, but it is not mandatory. Another important thing is that the bystander or the Good Samaritan would not be liable for any civil or criminal liability. So that is also important to understand. So if you can provide first aid to some patient, it would be really good for the patient and for the humanity. So what are the general principles of first aid? The first aider, the person who provides the first aid, should assume the responsibility of providing first aid until more competent person arrives. He also should send the message for help. He can call the ambulance services, he can call other people around him. Importantly, he should remain calm and conduct the first aid work without any panic. And he should dissuade the crowd from hovering over the patient. This is a very common sight. If a patient collapses on the street, everybody around him will just jump and just hover around the patient. So that should be decided by the first aider. Now, one of the most important emergency is the cardiac arrest. Cardiac arrest means that the patient's circulation is not there now. So the patient cannot get any oxygenation to the various organs like brain and heart. The nutrients cannot be served to the heart and the brain and other organs. So basic life support basically means that you externally support the circulation and ventilation without the use of any special equipment, except one equipment, which is the automated external defibrillator or AD. The major goal of basic life support is to provide adequate oxygen and perfusion to vital organs until more help arrives. The people with advanced cardiac life support availability, and they arrive to the site. So the first principle of basic life support is that there should be no danger to you. It should not happen that a person who collapses in the middle of the road, you as a hero jump to the middle of the road and try to resuscitate the patient. This may lead to another second casualty in terms of yourself becoming a casualty. So don't be very heroic in basic life support. Check that there is no danger to your life. Once you assume that there is no danger to your life, the second step is assess the responsiveness of the patient by shaking the shoulders of the patient gently, because there may be neck injury also. So shake the shoulders gently and ask the patient, how are you? Are you okay? If he responds, that means his airway is open. That is, he's not unconscious. If he does not respond to shaking the shoulders, then you call for help. Either you call for the help from other people who are around the patient, or you can use your own mobile and call the ambulance. And for this, you must know the ambulance numbers in your state also, your city. In Delhi, at least it is 102 or 1098. In Assam, it will be probably different, maybe 108. So if the patient is not responding to the commands and is lying on a bed, pull him down to the floor in a supine, that is with the bag on the ground. Open the mouth and see for any visible foreign bodies in the mouth. If you can see some visible foreign bodies in the mouth, try to remove with index and middle fingers. If the patient has any loose dentures, remove them. Now, when the patient is unconscious, the tongue of the patient it falls back and it obstructs the throat. So patient really cannot breathe properly. So you need to open the airway by two methods. One is head tilt chin lift method. The second is jaw thrust method. The head lift chin lift method is the one which is practiced most often, because jaw thrust is a difficult method. So even if you suspect a neck injury, you can still use the head tilt chin lift method to open the airway. In this, you place one hand on generally left hand on the forehead of the patient, tilt the head back, place the second hand, the two fingers, the index and the middle fingers on the chin of the patient, and lift the chin up. This will push the tongue out of the airway, and the airway gets opened. While you are opening the airway, simultaneously look for whether the patient is breathing or not breathing. So look for the chest rise, whether the chest is rising or not. That means if chest is not rising, he's probably not breathing. Listen for the breath sound coming from the nose or mouth, and feel for the breath sound over your cheek. If the patient is not breathing, that means patient is in cardiac arrest. A person who is having gasping breathing is also considered to be in cardiac arrest. If you are a trained person and you can check the pulse, you can check the carotid pulse by just put your hand on the Adam's apple, go to the groove towards your side and feel for the carotid artery. If the pulse is not palpable or the patient is not breathing, the patient is assumed to be in cardiac arrest and you start the cardiopulmonary resuscitation. So that means you start the chest compressions. So you have to push fast and push hard. Push fast at a rate of 100 to 120 per minute. Push hard to a depth of 5 to 6 centimeters in adults. So for this, keep one hand on the middle of the chest, on the center of the chest, with the heel resting on the center of the chest. The fingers are lifted away from the ribs. The hands, they should not be over the lower part of the breastbone, should not be on the abdomen, should not be on the ribs. Then place the second hand on top of the first hand, interlocking the fingers so that they don't touch the ribs. Then start the chest compressions. So lean over the patient vertically, keep the arms straight, and then do the chest compressions. Push it fast at a rate of about 100 to 120 per minute. So when you push it, after pushing it, relax it so that the chest wall comes back to normal. Again, do the same thing and keep on doing the same thing till the time the more help arise. If you are trained enough to provide the mouth-to-mouth breathings, then you can do after 30 compressions, you can provide 2 breaths. For this, after doing chest compression, you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 when you're doing the chest compressions. So after 30 compressions, you go back to the airway part, do the head tilt, chin lift method, seal the nose of the patient with the thumb and the index finger of the forehead hand, and put your mouth over the mouth of the victim, seal it, take a normal breath, and after sealing the mouth, give a breath to the patient over a period of 1 second. Release it for 1 second, again give the second breath up for over a period of 1 second. Immediately following 2 breaths, restart the chest compressions at 30:2 ratio, that is 30 chest compressions followed by 2 breaths. So this should be continued every 2 minutes for 2 minutes, and every 2 minutes change the compressor. The compressor becomes the person at the airway, and the person at the airway becomes the compressor now. But don't waste time on the changeover, not more than 10 seconds. If available, you can use a face mask for the breathing part. Though there is no recorded case of transmission of HIV or hepatitis B, there are some cases of transmission of COVID infection in the pandemic COVID area. After 2 minutes of CPR, that is chest compression and the breathing part, you may reassess the patient, whether the patient is starting responding in terms of whether he started moving, he started coughing, he's speaking, or is moving, making purposeful movements. That means that patient responded to a CPR, and you can leave the patient in that position then. So this is just a summary of the BLS, the basic life support. The first is shake and shout to see the responsiveness of the patient. The second is call the ambulance or call for help. Then check the breathing part by opening the airway by head tilt, chin lift method. If the patient is not breathing or having gasping breathing, you start the chest compressions at a rate of 100 to 120 per minute in adults. Definitely push hard and push fast, about twice per second. And if you're trained, you can give 30 to 2 cycles, that is 30 chest compression and 2 rescue breaths, and continue this till the time you become exhausted or more help arrives. Now, I said that in the basic life support, there is one instrument which is used, which is the automated external defibrillator, that is AED. And it should be used as soon as it's available to you. And you must have seen at the airports, at the malls, and the big places, big crowded places, a simple like AED and the machine is kept in lock and key here. So it is very simple to apply. Just turn on this switch, press this, the on button, switch on button. Apply the pads, one below the right, on the right side, below the right collarbone. The second pad on the left side, below the axilla. Then stop the CPR, stop the chest compressions. There is a button, analyze button, analysis or analyze button. Press that. It will analyze the rhythm of the heart, whether this is shockable or not shockable. If the prompt says that this is a shockable rhythm, then you charge the patient. There is a button for charge the defibrillator or the AED, and ensure that nobody is touching the patient, and then press the shock button. So turn on the AED, apply the pads, analyze the rhythm, charge the AED, and give a shock, ensuring that nobody is touching the patient. Immediately following the shock, restart the chest compressions. So the time limit should not be more than 10 seconds for discharging the shock. So once the patient is recovered, that he's become, at least it becomes, the breathing starts, then the patient has to be put in recovery position. It is little difficult to understand by figures, but I just try to explain a little bit about this. The patient hand, which is first open the airway, just tilt the chest head a little backward. The nearest arm, the arm which is nearest to you, make it go upwards and bend at the elbow with palm facing upwards. Bring the other arm, the farthest arm towards you. Keep it over the chin of the patient, the cheek of the patient. Then the further leg is moved upwards, is bent upwards, and then the patient is turned to this side, to the side in which you are sitting, and the head is again moved upward to open the airway. So this will ensure that the air is open and patient will not aspirate in case he vomits out. So the second important condition is shock. Shock basically means that patient not getting adequate amount of, the tissues are not getting adequate amount of the blood supply or oxygen. Initially the pulse will be rapid. The skin will be sweaty, it may be cold, it may be pale. But later the patient develops rapid shallow breathing, the pulse becomes thready weak, the skin becomes gray-blue in color. If you press the fingernail and release the pressure, it does not regain the color immediately. The patient would have weakness and dizziness and will complain of thirst. Later on, the brain gets involved in terms of the brain doesn't get the oxygen adequately. So the patient becomes restless, he starts yawning, then he becomes unresponsive, and finally the heart stops. So finally, ultimately, the patient would have a cardiac arrest. But we have to treat the patient, we have to manage the patient before the patient goes into cardiac arrest. So if the patient is having bleeding because of this, which is causing shock, try to stop bleeding by putting pressure on the bleeding site. Make the patient lie on the ground or on the bed with a blanket below that so that he doesn't get cold. Raise the legs of the patient. You can keep a stool or a chair to raise the leg of the patient. If there is any tight clothing around the neck or the chest, loosen the clothing. And keep the casualty warm by covering the bodies and the legs by maybe a coat or a blanket, and then call for the emergency help. What not to do in a patient with shock? Do not allow the casualty to eat or drink. If he feels thirsty, you can moisten the lips with a little water. Do not warm the casualty with a hot water bottle or any direct source of heat like a fire. In pregnant ladies, you must turn the lady to the left side by putting a pillow below the right hip. This will reduce the pressure on the large vein, which brings the blood back to the heart, and therefore the amount of blood which the heart can pump during CPR or otherwise will be increased. So if you place a pillow or two pillows behind the right hip, raise the right hip, So the patient remains in the lateral position. Anaphylaxis is a kind of serious allergic reaction to a drug or to insect bites. The first response to it they call for help. So immediately call the ambulance or other people. Some people do carry epinephrine auto-injector because they know they are allergic to something. So if the person is carrying epinephrine auto-injector, you can inject it in the hip area. Again, ask the patient to lie back, still on the back, loosen the tight clothes, and don't give the person anything to drink. The symptom may start improving with the treatment, but again, take the patient to a hospital because there may be recurrence of symptoms within a few hours. Another important emergency is choking. The patient can inhale a foreign body, he can get choked. If the patient is having partial obstruction of the windpipe, he may be still able to breathe and cough. In such a situation, do not remove the foreign body. Do not make any attempts to remove the foreign body. If the patient is having inadequate breathing because of the choking, he'll be having a weak cough. There may be stridor. Stridor means basically the sound when the patient takes the inhalation. There may be respiratory distress. In complete obstruction, patient will be unable to breathe. He will be unable to cough or speak. And this can be shown by the so-called universal choking sign, where the patient clenches his neck, the front of the neck, with both the hands. So if the patient is not in great distress, he is having only partial obstruction of the windpipe, encourage the patient to cough. This may dislodge the foreign body, and the foreign body may come out while the patient coughs. If this fails, make the patient bend forward like this, then make strokes between the two shoulder blades on the back side of the patient, and this may again dislodge the foreign body, and the foreign body may come out from the mouth. If both these methods fail and the patient becomes severely dyspneic, there is stridor is there is sound well when the patient inhales, then you can try what is known as Heimlich's maneuver. In Heimlich's maneuver, you stand behind the person, place one arm around the waist of the patient with the fist between the lower part of the sternum, the breastbone, and the umbilicus, with the thumb towards the abdomen. And circle the patient with the other hand. Place the other hand on top of the first hand. Then give a pressure in the upward and inward direction using the first hand, while the second hand gives additional pressure. So you can keep on doing this till the time the patient becomes unresponsive or the foreign body becomes dislodged. If the patient becomes unresponsive while doing this thing, you start the standard basic life support. If somebody is alone and he gets choked, he can use the two hands and use the back of the chair to apply pressure on the abdomen so that the foreign body can get dislodged. Now coming to trauma, the general principles in the first aid would be that you don't make the victim sit up or stand until you are sure that injury is trivial. If the patient has an abnormal posture, do not try to correct it unless you are sure there is no fracture. In trauma patients, do not move the neck, particularly if the patient complains of neck pain, has evidence of injury around the neck area, has head injury or multiple fracture in the body, or is in altered level of consciousness. In such a situation, the neck should be immobilized. And this is one of the simple methods to immobilize a neck. Just place two blankets, rolled blankets on either side of the hand. The lower part of the blanket should touch the shoulders. So this will immobilize the neck of the patient till the time more help arrives. The trauma patient could have a wound from which the bleeding can occur. So you need to control the bleeding. Most often you can control the bleeding by direct pressure over the wound. You may also elevate the limb, and once the bleeding stops, you can apply the pressure bandage over the wound. But very rarely, as a last resort, you can do what is known as tourniquet test. In this windlass technique is used, that uses a white bandage. You can use a tie, you can use the sleeve of a shirt, you can use a head scarf, a white thing, apply it about 5 centimeters above the wound, make a bandage kind of thing, apply one knot, then put a long wooden thing or a pen or a wood stick over the knot, the first knot, make a second knot on top of that, then rotate the pen or the stick till the time the bleeding stops. Then tie this stick or the pen at this with another knot at the same position. Now this will be painful for a conscious patient, but this has to be done in case the bleeding doesn't stop with the other methods. The only thing is to remember is that do not keep the pressure applied for more than 30 minutes, because if you apply for more than 30 minutes, the chances of the tissues which are distal to the area of applying the tourniquet, they may die, they may develop gangrene. So after 30 minutes, you may release it for 5 minutes. If the bleeding still continues, you can reapply it for another 30 minutes. Now, amputation of at a part is a relatively common thing. The patient can have the amputation of a finger or a toe, maybe a full hand, maybe even ear also. So what you can do is you must take the casualty as well as the amputated part to the hospital as soon as possible. So for the amputated part, put the amputated part, like for example in this figure, the finger is there. You put it in a saline motion gauze. Put this in a plastic bag, and then put this plastic bag in a cup or in a tray containing slurry of ice. So this is again hand put in a plastic bag. The plastic bag is put in an ice box. Always put the name of the victim on the ice box as well as the time of injury, because this will decide whether the patient the amputated part can be reimplanted or not. Fracture is another common thing. You can diagnose a fracture by seeing that there is deformity, swelling, or bruising at the site of the fracture or the site of injury. There will be pain or difficulty in moving the area, which again indicates that the fracture is there. There may be shortening or bending of a limb. Now there's one method which is known as you just apply pressure on both sides of the bones. If you feel a coarse gratus or crepitus, this indicates fracture is there. But do not try to use this to diagnose the fracture, because this may injure the nerves, the vessels, and cause more injuries. In certain fracture like thigh bone fracture, shock may occur. In open fracture, there may be wound with the bones at the end of the bones protruding from the wound. The aim of managing a fracture in the first aid is to prevent movement at the injury site, and then to take the patient to a hospital while making as comfortable as possible during transportation. So when the fracture is there, you support the joint above and one joint below the injured area with your hands, or you can take the help of some other helper. Place padding around the area of the injury for extra support, but for firmer support, secure the injured part to an unaffected part of the body. For example, if the hand is the upper limb is fractured, you can put a sling around the neck. This will kind of decrease the movement of the fractured bones. In case of a lower limb, you put a kind of padding between the two limbs, between the two legs. Then apply a bandage. Tie the bandage with both the limbs are tied with a bandage with the knots on the uninjured side. So then you can transport the patient to a hospital with the splinting. This is a kind of splinting. Ankle sprain is again a common emergency. This occurs when the ankle gets twisted while walking or while jumping or while running. So for this, you can raise the leg of the patient. Maybe you can keep on your foot on your leg. Apply cold compresses using ice packs or cold pads, and then keep the ice pad or the cold pads for about 20 minutes, not more than 20 minutes. This will reduce the swelling, the pain, and the redness in the area of the ankle sprain. And then the patient can be taken to a hospital whether they will decide whether an X-ray is required or not required. Now, if someone is having impaled, like for example, somebody is fallen on a railing from the top, do not try to lift the casualty of the object. Let the casualty remain on the same in the same area. Let him be impaled. Let him lie with the impaled rods inside. But you can support the casualty body weight until the emergency service arrives with the cutting instruments. If a sharp object like knife or a scissor is there, do not remove it. You can apply bandage around the area of the impalement, the impaled object, but do not apply pressure on the impaled object so that it is not damaged further. But do not try to remove it. Let it remain in place only, whether it's in the forearm, in the abdomen, anywhere, in the chest. Do not try to remove it. And then take the patient to the hospital. Burns are again very common in a household. Most often they are superficial or partial thickness burns. Superficial means only the upper part of the skin is involved, which leads to redness, swelling, and some tenderness, or the pain is there. In partial thickness burn, the deeper layers of skin are involved, which results in blister formation, which are filled with fluid. Full thickness burn occurs when the site of burn is burnt for a longer time. So all the tissues below the skin are involved in this. Muscles, the bones, the nerves are all involved. Most often we see the patient with superficial burns or the partial thickness burns. So importantly, again, in the minor burns, you pour the cold water for at least 20 minutes on the burnt area. Remove any rings or any constrictive things like shoes or watch or jewelry from the burnt area. If the blisters are present, do not break them. But if the blister breaks, clean the area with water and apply an antibiotic ointment. After cooling, apply a lotion such as one which is containing aloe vera or a moisturizing cream, and cover the burn area with a sterile gauze bandage, but do not use the fluffy cotton. The patient often requires some pain reliever. For the major burns, again the same, that you flood the injured part with the cold water. And if possible, do not make the patient lie on the burn site, because this will cause, this may decrease the temperature of the patient. Again, remove any constricting things like ring, watches, shoes, or burnt or smoldering clothing, but do not try to remove any clothing which is stuck in the burn. You can cover with the kitchen plastic film. And importantly, in major burns, watch for any signs of breathing difficulty, because there may be inhalation of smoke which can cause breathing difficulty. For flooding the injury, if suppose a large part is involved in major burns, do not do the flushing with the cold water for a longer time, but this may decrease the temperature of the patient to hypothermic range. So cautions: do not remove anything which is sticking to the burn area. Do not burst any blisters. Do not use adhesive dressings or apply adhesive tape to the skin. Do not cover facial burns because they can obstruct the respiratory passages. Do not allow the casualty to eat or drink because he or she may require surgery. And obviously, do not aggressively cool the larger part of the body because this can cause hypothermia. Now, many burns can be treated at home only, need not go to the hospital. But some burns will require the patient to be sent to the hospitals. Like patient with full thickness burns which involve the face, hands, feet, or genital areas, burns that extend around the arm or leg, partial thickness burns, which is more than 1% of body surface area, that is approximately the size of a palm. Superficial burns, which is more than 5% of body surfaces, that is size of 5 palm areas, and all electrical and chemical burns. They all should go to the hospital, otherwise the patient can be treated at home only. Now coming to electric current injuries, most of the low voltage and the high tension currents are alternating currents, which cause muscular spasm, and therefore the patient remains attached to the source of electric current. The victim will remain electrically charged till the time the wire is broken from there. So important thing to remember is do not touch the casualty if it is still in contact with electric current, because this will be acting as a live electricity. Do not use anything metallic to break the electric current contact. So if possible, turn off the source of electricity, like mains can be turned off. If that is not possible, then you can move the source away from both you and the casualty. So you can stand on a dry material like a wooden box, plastic piles, or piles of magazines or newspapers. Use a wooden pole or a stick or a broom. Push the casualty limb away from the electrical source. Otherwise, suppose it is not possible, then you can use a rope which can be looped around the ankle of the patient, and then it can be pulled from away from the electrical current. Stroke is a very important emergency because it is a time-sensitive condition. The patient has to be sent to the hospital as early as possible. But before that, you have to remember, you have to recognize whether the patient is having stroke or not. So you can use the mnemonic FAST to diagnose whether the patient is having stroke or not. FAST means F stands for the face, A for arms, S for speech, and T is that time is brain. So face, whether the patient has any asymmetry in the face when he tries to smile. Arm, whether there is weakness on one side of the body, the arm particularly. Speech, whether the patient is having slurring of speech or he cannot understand what you are speaking. The time is at every minute's count here. So you have to be very urgently call the ambulance in case you diagnose the patient to be having stroke. So time is brain here. Other feature which may indicate the patient is having stroke would include sudden numbness on one side of the body, blurring of vision or double vision, severe headache, sudden dizziness and unsteadiness, and patient may even fall due to unsteadiness. These all indicate that patient could be having stroke. So call the ambulance urgently and shift the patient to a hospital. Heart attack, most often the patient would have a chest pain, which is central in location generally. It feels like a pressure. The pain may go to the shoulder area. In addition, the patient could have sweating, could have nausea or vomiting, and could have breathlessness. Now, these are the locations where the chest pain can occur. It may not be only in chest, it can occur only in the upper abdomen. It can occur only in the neck area. It can be only in the shoulder area. It can only be in the back area. So the pain may not be in the central area, in the chest area. It may be in any place from the jaw to the upper abdomen. So what to do as a first aid? If the patient is having any tight clothing, try to loosen the clothing. Like patient is having a tie, so loosen the tie. Ask the patient to sit up, or maybe he can take a position which he feels most comfortable. If the patient is having nitrate tablets, give it below the tongue. If the pain does not go in 3 to 5 minutes, you can repeat a tablet of nitrate, but meantime call the ambulance so that patient can be taken to the hospital for the further workup. Fainting, again, the patient can faint because of multiple causes. The usual causes are having pain, severe pain, is frightened, is hungry, is emotionally upset, or is standing for a long time. In elderly, it may be because of some cardiac diseases. So at home, just raise the legs of the patient and then call for help. A person who is actively seizing, you make the space around the casualty, ask the people to move away from the casualty, remove any potentially dangerous items such as hot drinks, any sharp objects from the nearby. The casualty's head should be protected by keeping some padded towels or some blankets around him. The important thing is do not put anything in the casualty mouth. It is very commonly seen that people try to put some spoon or something in the mouth of the patient, but that should be avoided because this can break the jaw. Again, do not try to attempt to restrain him or stop jerking during a seizure by force. And once the patient recovers from the seizures, put him in recovery position so that he does not aspirate his secretions. Dehydration again is very common in summers, particularly because of vomiting, diarrhea, food poisoning. So how to recognize dehydration? The mouth will become dry, the eyes will be appearing dry with no tears, the lips will be dry and cracked, the patient will have dizziness and confusion, the urine becomes dark in color, the amount of urine passed by the patient is less. In young children, these eyes become sunken. And in young babies less than 1 year, this soft spot on the head, on the front of the head, may get sunken, which is the fontanelle. So the first aid is simple. Give the patient, the victim, plenty of fluids to drink. Many times the water may be sufficient, but it's better to give oral rehydration solution or even coconut water to rehydrate the patient more quickly. Now, heat exhaustion can occur in summer, particularly in summers, in elderly and very young persons when they exert during the summer vacation, time. The symptoms are very, very vague, but they have headache, dizziness, and confused. The appetite is lost. They have some nausea. The skin is sweaty, pale. They may have cramps in the arms, legs, or abdomen, and the pulse become weak. The breathing becomes shallow. So if we have a history that patient is exposed to heat, and then patient has any of these symptoms, think of heat exhaustion as the cause of the symptoms. So take the patient to a cool, shady place. Ask him to lie down and raise the legs again, like you did for the person who is fainting. Give plenty of water and ORS to drink, and monitor the casualties vitals, including the temperature. Even if the patient recovers from heat exhaustion, ask him to consult a doctor, because there may be recurrence of symptoms. There may be something more serious than heat exhaustion. So ask him to contact a doctor after he recovers from the heat exhaustion symptoms. Hypothermia, patient will be having shivering. This is exposure to cold. The skin is cold, pale and dry. The patient will be having disorientation, irrational behavior, he is lethargic, has a slow and shallow breathing, the pulse becomes slow. In extreme cases, the patient develops cardiac arrest. So here again, take the casualty to a sheltered place and shield from the wind, because if the wind is there, the patient will develop more of hypothermia. Remove and replace any wet clothing. Ensure that his head is covered with something, with maybe blankets or with towels. Do not ask the patient to lie on the ground. Keep something like blanket or newspapers below the patient, and cover him with blankets or newspapers. If the casualty is fully alert, you can give him some warm, non-alcoholic drinks and high-energy food like chocolates, if they're available, and seek medical advice. So these are do nots for the hypothermic patients. Do not give any alcohol to the patient, because this is going to produce dilatation of the veins over the skin, causing more loss of heat. Do not place direct heat sources such as hot water bottle next to the casualty. And in case the patient develops cardiac arrest when he is hypothermic, try to continue CPR until more help arrives. The frostbite generally occurs in the fingers and the toes, and it occurs again because of exposure to cold environment. The first symptom is generally the pins and needles feeling in the toes and the fingers. Then the this is followed with numbness, and then the skin becomes hard and stiff. Later on, the blisters can also develop in these patients, and ultimately the patient will have gangrene or the dead skin over the toes and the fingers. So it is in the pre-hospital, as a first aid, ask the casualty to put his hands in the armpits, and then move the casualty to a warm area. Remove any constricting elements like boots or rings, anything like that. Let him continue to put his hands in the armpits, or you can put the affected part in your hands, but do not rub the hands, because this is going to damage the tissue, damage the skin. If available, you can put the affected parts in the warm water at around 40 degrees Celsius. After that, dry the area carefully and put a light dressing, and raise the affected limb to reduce the swelling. These patients must go to the hospital after initial care, because their chances of getting into severe form of frostbite are high. In case of drowning, if you are comfortable with the breathing part, you can provide the mouth-to-mouth breathing. You can do the ABC, that is open the airway, then give the breaths and the circulation. But if the drowning is because diving into deep water, be careful about the C-spine, the cervical spine or the neck. In the films, you always see that the hero particularly tries to remove the water from the stomach by pressing on the abdomen. That is discouraged, should not be done. The body should be wiped off of the fluid or the water, because this otherwise can cause hypothermia. The bleeding from nose can occur because the small vessels in the nose can rupture after a trauma. They can rupture after a sneeze, after a coughing, severe bout of coughing, or even because of hypertension or high blood pressure, and patients were taking blood thinners like aspirin. So when the patient has bleeding from the nose, tilt the head forward. Ask the patient to sit up and tilt the head forward. Ask him to breathe through the mouth. Ask him to pinch the soft part of the nose with thumb and index finger. And then ask him not to tilt the head back. If he tilts the head back, if the blood can go into the throat area, can induce vomiting, can also go into the lungs. Ask the patient not to speak, not to cough, not to spit, or not to sniff. And ask him to keep the compression for about 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, release the compression. If the bleeding still continues, you can do the same procedure again twice, each for 10 minutes each again. And if the bleeding still continues after that, then he has to be taken to the hospital. Knocked out tooth is a common emergency again, mainly because of trauma, in adults particularly. So what you can do is, one thing is that you hold the tooth from the crown, not from the root area. The root area contains sensitive structures. So hold the tooth from the crown area and push it back into the socket as soon as possible. Put a gauze piece here, and then ask the patient to lightly bite on the socket of the broken tooth. If the patient is not, you are not able to do it, or the time is already more than 10 to 20 minutes, you can put the tooth into the milk and ask the patient to go to a dentist so that he can reimplant the tooth into within the next 2 hours. They may be bleeding from the tooth socket. The tooth may be lost when they may be bleeding from the tooth socket. So just use a gauze piece which is thick enough so that the teeth do not meet each other. Give the gauze piece into the socket and ask him to bite on the gauze piece for about 10 to 20 minutes. And this often reduces bleeding from the tooth socket. Cramps are commonly seen, particularly in the night time, maybe after the strenuous exercise, maybe because of the loss of salt and water from the body. They often involve the calf muscles. They can involve any muscle in the body, but most often they involve the calf muscles. So for this, lift the leg, make it straight at the knee joint. Keep one hand on the calf muscle. With the other hand, put the foot, flex the foot, or that means put the foot towards the shin of the patient, and then gently massage the calf muscle for a few minutes. This will relieve the cramps in most of the patients. If the patient has chemical burns in the eyes because of, say, acid or alkali injuries, the most important thing is that it must be washed as early as possible. The washing should be done for at least 20 minutes. So this is one method where the head is below the tap, which is running cold water. The other eye should be above. So the injured eye should be below, the other eye should be, the normal eye should be above, so that there is no dilution of there is no injury to the other eye because of the liquid draining from the injured eye. The second thing is that you can pour the water from the top. This is a little easier than the first one. And after about 20 minutes of washing the eye, you can apply a gauze over the eye, or you can put a cup so that the eye doesn't get injured further, and then take the patient to the hospital. Now, patients with poisoning often come to the emergency. In the first aid, the important thing is that you must open the airway, check for the breathing, and check for the circulation. If the patient's clothes are contaminated with the poison, like patient with the liquid insecticides, then try to remove the clothes and give a wash to the patient, but only after wearing the gloves, the gowns, and other things. Do not induce vomiting in these patients because this may injure the throat and this is of no use in the pre-hospital setting. And then contact the poison center or take the patient to a hospital. The last emergency is the snake bite. In the pre-hospital setting, you can follow what is known as do it right approach. R is for reassurance. Now it is very easy to say reassure the patient, but how to reassure the patient? You can tell the patient that about 70% of bites are by non-poisonous snakes. About 50% of bites by poisonous snakes also do not cause any toxic features. And even if the patient develops toxic features, medical aid is available in the hospitals. So reassurance is very important for the patient because this will reduce the anxiety. Reducing anxiety means the heart rate will decrease. So the venom will not spread much to the body. I stand for immobilize the bitten limb, like you just immobilize the fracture. Then get to the nearest hospital. G for get to the nearest hospital. Don't waste time on the traditional medicines and tell the doctors about the symptoms. So tell him what you are feeling. So this way you do not waste much time in other treatment, other modality treatment. So directly after reassuring the patient, immobilize the patient, go to the nearest hospital, tell the doctor about the symptoms. Now in the rural areas, this is one method to take the patient to the hospital. The patient sits on the mobile in the middle, with one person behind him, so that he does not fall while driving the patient to the hospital. So these are the cautions. These are do nots in the snake bite patients. Do not apply tourniquet. Do not incise and suck the wounds. Do not apply suction devices to suck the venom out. Do not wash the wound. Generally, in other bites, we say they wash the wounds. But here in snake bites, washing is not advisable, but this is going to hasten the absorption of toxin from the wound. Do not apply ice to reduce the pain. And importantly, if the snake is dead, do not handle it very carefully because even dead snakes can bite you again. So everybody must have an emergency medical kit at home. And these are some of the contents of the medical kit. Important being like tablet aspirin for patient and tablet syrup paracetamol, the wooden boards of stent, alcohol for any cleaning the wounds, bandages, crepe bandage, and torch. And they also must have a manual on emergency medicine, on initial emergency care or first aid in the emergency medical kit. It should be kept out of the reach of the children because they should not consume these things which may be dangerous to the children. So in the adult end, I will just say that first aid is very important to know that this is going to decrease the mortality, decrease the suffering of the patient, decrease the complication which the patient can develop later on. Everybody must be very well familiar with the first aid. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for that wonderfully exhilarating presentation of yours. You have touched almost every spectrum of first aid in emergency medicine, and we have learned a lot as well as refreshed our knowledge that we had earlier. And what we think is that no matter how much a person is technically educated, to use this education, the utilization of common sense and fastness is extremely important. Thank you very much once again, sir. And the topic is open for discussion now. If anybody has any questions to ask, you may kindly do so. Yes, any questions, please? We have unmuted everyone, so anybody can ask any questions.
There is one comment that Hindi mein bolo, so I don't know how to what to say now.
Right.
Hello.
Anybody can ask in Hindi also. That's not an issue.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Are you hearing?
Yes, yes. Please
Hello.
go on.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Praveen Agarwal, sir. I'm Dr. Deepak from GMC.
Yeah,
So,
Dr. Deepak, how are you?
we are very much happy to hear illuminating talk on first aid in emergency. I think it will be very helpful for not only for the emergency department but for all medical colleges. And in this context, I like to request you to say something whether the medical colleges as well as all other health institutions where there is no provisions for emergency medicine or emergency ED in all setups. What can I do in future, particularly for first aid as well as emergency? So recently the government of India has also suggested that all medical colleges should be equipped with emergency medicine department. Will you give some advice in this regard to us, sir?
Dr. Deepak, you are right that the NMC has said clearly now that every medical college is going to have emergency medicine department by 2022-23. So that's a good step, number one. Number two, the curriculum for the undergraduate must have the first aid at least. Because if you see the doctors even passing out who are interns or passing out the internship, they are not really able to manage the emergencies to a great extent, I would say. First aid also is not really known to them. See, forget about the general public. Even the doctors many times don't know how to do the first aid for a particular condition. So in fact, we suggested to the erstwhile MCI also that they should be part of the undergraduate training. But the committee probably, I don't know, they decided against it. But definitely we'll pursue it further.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? While somebody else asks a question, sir, I would like to ask you a question, sir, a small one.
You may ask in Hindi so that other people can understand.
No, my Hindi is not.
I'll answer in Hindi probably. I try to ask in Hindi.
Yes, sir. My Hindi is not very good. I wouldn't take that risk. Yes, sir. So I would like to ask you, sir, that often in the sports grounds, we see sudden deaths of sports persons. So what are the precautions that have to be kept ready to avoid or maybe manage such cases when a person falls prey to this kind of conditions?
The deaths which occur in the particulars which occur in the sport, during the sports particularly, most often happens younger people. Right now there is no kind of pre-sports checkup in the sense of ECG particularly, or any family history of sudden death. Because many of these deaths are because of cardiac arrhythmias, and they have underlying illnesses which may be picked up on the ECG also. So if before going for sports, particularly the contact support sports, like even say cricket, somebody is hit on the chest by a ball, can develop the cardiac issue and may die because of that. So important thing is that people who are there in the field, at least the physio is there. I'm sure physio is well versed with the CPR part. If you recall, nearly about a few months ago, one of the persons collapsed in the field and he was saved because of the CPR done in the field itself. So CPR is really important to learn for everybody. Theoretically, it is difficult to say that how to learn the CPR. But everybody must undergo training on the CPR. See, we are trying to do CPR training for the school children, for the police people. And we are doing it for the last many years now. And this is really useful for the children also to learn how to, because they're staying with their old parents also. So at home, when the children is also there and the parent develops a cardiac arrest, they can try to revive this parent. So in the sports area also the same thing can happen. This should happen. Everybody who's basically in the team as a teammate should know this CPR. But that is what is going to save his life.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. We have a question in the chat box. Shriya Gupta. She asks, when to pour water in case of burns?
As soon as possible. Apply the cold water or maybe, but don't put the ice. You can just pour the cold water on the board, on the burn area, but don't apply ice. So generally tendency to apply ice on the burnt area. That is going to decrease the blood supply further to the burnt area. So just apply cold water about 20 minutes. You see the potato, hot potato. To cool it down will take maybe several minutes. So skin which is burnt also takes several minutes to cool down. So that's why you have to cold water for at least 15 to 20 minutes to cool the skin. So try it as it is possible.
How cold should it be, sir?
See, normal cold water is enough. Don't take the fridge water. Just the tap water which is cold in the winters is enough. In summers, of course, you have to take the water which is from the fridge only, which is generally at 4 to 8 degrees Celsius.
Now she also asks, what about cold burns?
Which burns? Cold.
Cold burns.
Cold burn means?
I think frost.
Frostbite maybe?
Frostbite.
Yeah, I said frostbite, basically the patient has to keep the hands, generally the hands and toes are involved in this basically. So if the hands involved, he can just keep the hands in the armpits. So this is going to increase the temperature, local temperature, but do not put the fingers or the toes in the hot water. That is totally contraindicated.
Right, any other questions, please? Okay, there's another question here. Armand Perang asks, so what should we do in case of food poisoning?
Well, food poisoning is a misnomer, I would say, because it's not really a poisoning in that sense. It causes basically, most often it causes vomiting and diarrhea. There's some food poisoning which can produce systemic features like botulism is one condition. Organophosphate poisoning can cause it, but most often the food poisoning causes diarrhea and vomiting, and the patient will get dehydrated because of that. So identify whether the patient is got dehydrated or not by symptoms, like patient is feeling thirsty, the skin become dry, the eyes become dry, the mouth become dry, and then you give the patient whatever is available to you. Even simple water is good enough in the most of the situations. If you have the oral rehydration solution, give it to the patient as much as possible, as much as he wants to take. And because the patient is vomiting, if you have a tablet which can be given below tongue of the antiemetic drug like ondansetron is there, so that can be given to the patient. He may tolerate the fluids after that. But if the patient is not able to tolerate fluid because of the vomiting, then he has to be taken to the hospital.
Thank you, sir. We can see a team from Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed Medical College, Barpeta. Would you like to ask any questions, Principal, sir?
Not from the principal side, sir.
Yes, Professor Raman Talakdar, Principal of Barpeta Medical College.
Good afternoon, sir. All topics are being relevant. We have gone through.
Your voice is not. I think you're muted or what?
Okay. Yeah, am I audible?
Yeah,
Yes,
not
now.
audible.
Yeah. Good afternoon, sir. I'm Dr. Raman Talukdar. Basically, I belong to the Department of Radiology, and so this topic is definitely going to analyze the emergency aspect of the various subjects that you have been covering, and the postgraduate students are benefited. And also, I would like to request this academic register, if possible, to share the recorded topic so that it can be given to the undergraduate students. And most of the medical colleges are already having Dr. Deepak Sharma here stated that emergency medicine department and all. Of course, few medical colleges which have come recently are going to gear up with all the facilities being required in the emergency department. Thank you very much.
For your kind information, we'll be uploading this talk in YouTube. So for future reference, anytime anybody who wants can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. Yes, now we have another question here. So how do we perform CPR in the COVID scenario? Can mouth-to-mouth resuscitation be performed before the medical aid arrives? This is from Vandana.
Yes, yeah, Dr. Vandana. in COVID scenario, definitely you're not going to do a mouth-to-mouth breathing. You're just going to open the airway and do the chest compression only. So do not attempt the mouth-to-mouth breathing in a patient suspected to get COVID. Definitely not. Mouth-to-mouth breathing is contraindicated there. What you can do is that at least you must do while opening the airway and while doing chest compression is that you must wear a mask. And as they make the casualty also wear a mask also. So at least during CPR also, they will chest compressing the chest also. That time also there is no exhalation of the viruses into the atmosphere. So no mouth-to-mouth breathing, definitely not.
We have another question. Can an amputated finger be rejoined through surgery?
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Well,
In
was
fact,
elaborated.
if you saw the TV about a year back, I think probably, there was a policeman whose hand was cut by somebody. And he himself drove to the hospital, which was about 3 hours away from that, without storing the amputated. Just he held the amputated hand in the other hand and drove to the hospital 3 hours. And his hand was joined.
There's another question here. Should we tie off a snake bite?
Should we tie off? No.
Tie off a snake bite.
No. Tourniquet is contraindicated in snake bite patients. Definitely not.
That has been already
what happens is when you apply tourniquet with a snake bite person,
Hmm.
the distal part of the arm or the limb becomes swollen, because you never know, the blood supply also gets affected because of the tourniquet. And studies have shown that it doesn't really help to apply tourniquet in the snake bite patients. So definitely not.
Thank you, sir. By the time yes, we have another here. What would be the first aid management of foreign body inside the ear?
If the foreign body is in terms of an insect, like a crawling insect can go into the ear, then you can put the mineral oil into the ear. But suppose you have a vegetable thing like a seed or something like that in the ear, then you cannot put anything in the ear and just go to the hospital.
All right. How to control bleeding in accident case?
See, if there's a wound visible to you, see, there may be bleeding internally, there may be bleeding externally. Internal bleeding, you cannot do anything in the as a first aid measure. External bleeding, you can stop by applying pressure. Most often, by applying pressure for about 5 to 10 minutes, the bleeding will stop. As I said, in the limb, you can apply the tourniquet in case required as a last resort only. After applying the pressure bandage first, if that also doesn't help, then you can apply a tourniquet by windlass method.
So I think this you could repeat it in Hindi.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, अगर आपको ट्रॉमा के बाद इंजरी के कोई चोट लगती है तो दो तरह की ब्लीडिंग हो सकती है. एक तो अंदर की ब्लीडिंग हो सकती है जो कि आपको बाहर विजिबल नहीं होगी. दूसरी हो सकती है जो बाहर विजिबल होगी. उस समय आप उसको प्रेशर देके रोक सकते हैं. आप 5 से 10 मिनट तक प्रेशर अप्लाई करें उसके ऊपर, डायरेक्टली उसके ऊपर, वुंड के ऊपर जहाँ पे इंजरी है. और आमतौर पर उससे वो रुक जाएगी. अगर नहीं रुकती तो आप थोड़ा सा, अगर लिम्ब पे है, सपोज हाथ पे या पैर पे, तो उसको एलिवेट कर सकते हैं. अगर तब भी नहीं रुकती है तो आप प्रेशर बैंडेज बांध सकते हैं. उसको आप बैंडेज ऊपर लगा के उसको प्रेशर से बांध दीजिएगा. वेट फॉर 10 मिनट्स. अगर 10 मिनट के बाद नहीं रुकती है तो आप टूनिक अप्लाई करें. फिर जो मैंने आपको बताया था भी, आप बैंडेज बांध के उसमें एक पेन या पेंसिल या पेन डाल के उसको टाइट कर दे ताकि उसमें ब्लीडिंग रुक जाए. उसका एम है भी आप जो आर्टरी की ब्लीडिंग है वो रुक जाएगी उससे.
Thank you so much, sir. We have our next person who is an MSc nursing student. Is it? Yeah, she is Lily, an MSc nursing student. She asks, in hypothermia, why we should not let the person come in contact with hot water back directly?
If you keep the hot water back directly over the patient, over the body of the patient, the chances of getting burns are very high. So that's why you never apply the heat directly to the patient. You may apply heat from indirectly, maybe from a sun flow, the sun blower is there or some heater is there. You can apply from indirect source, but do not keep directly over the body of the patient a hot water bottle. This can cause local burns.
The next question is what to do when a child of 3 years drinks a whole bottle of cough syrup?
Well, the cough syrup generally have antihistamines and one of the types of, not opioid exactly, but one of the types of opioids, dextromethorphan, which can cause some kind of drowsiness, may cause breathing kind of decreased breathing also sometimes. The only thing is that if the child don't induce vomiting, that's number one. Because if you induce vomiting, the chances of aspiration are there, chances of injury are there. Best thing is to contact the poison center. And if they advise the patient, the child should be taken to a hospital, then take the child to the hospital.
Thank you,
Generally,
sir.
the amount of antihistamine and amount of dextromethorphan is not so high in the pediatric cough syrups, but in adult cough syrup, definitely the amount is little high for a 3-year-old child.
Thank you, sir. There's another question here.
Shreya is asking in Hindi,
Yes.
right?
So the next
Okay.
answer goes in Hindi. Yeah.
अगर आप किसी बच्चे ने 3 साल के बच्चे ने अगर सारी बॉटल पी ली है, कफ सिरप की बॉटल पी ली है, तो उसमें आपको एक तो सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट चीज अभी वॉमिटिंग उसको उल्टी नहीं करवानी है। एक बॉटल अगर बच्चों की कफ सिरप है तो उसमें इतना ज़्यादा क्वांटिटी नहीं होगी जिससे उसको ज़्यादा पॉइजनिंग होगी। अगर वो बड़ों के कफ सिरप है तो उसमें उसके पॉइजनिंग होने के चांसेस काफ़ी ज़्यादा हैं 3 साल के बच्चे में। तो इसलिए आप उसमें पॉइजन सेंटर को कॉन्टैक्ट करें, और अगर वो कहते हैं भी आपको हॉस्पिटल में जाना चाहिए तो हॉस्पिटल में चले जाइएगा, और वॉमिटिंग इंड्यूस नहीं करिएगा कभी भी।
So the next question we have, what can we do to avoid that a person experiences a short period of unconsciousness, that's fainting, avoid fainting?
If the patient is young, then chances are that the faintings are because of a benign cause, that is not a serious cause. Like maybe the patient is emotionally touched or maybe having hunger. In that case, just lift the, any case anyway, you lift the legs up, keep a stool below the legs, below the ankles, lift the legs up. Most often the patient will recover the consciousness within a few seconds of that. If the patient does not recover, a patient is an elderly person, then after even the patient recovers, he should be taken to a hospital.
Okay, so we have another question here. In future, what are the possibilities of organ and limb transplants? How far it can go?
No, sorry, I didn't get the question.
In future, what are
Right.
the possibilities of organ and limb transplants? How far it can go? Mrinal
Well,
Garu.
it can go as far as 3D printing. You can have organs printed in 3D and just implant it. So you may not require the cadavers, you may not require the live human beings.
Wow. Is it futuristic, sir, or is it being worked upon somewhere?
It is being worked upon, already worked upon. Not successful till now, but definitely it's being worked upon. I'm sure within the next 5 years, you'll see a lot of cases like this.
That's interesting. So, any other questions? Anybody? Yeah, there's one, I think. Mosquito repellent liquid. If a child has mosquito repellent, I think it's going to be the same thing like
Yeah,
earlier.
mosquito repellent liquid is not really very toxic to an adult particularly, but it will be toxic to a child, definitely. So he has to be taken to a hospital.
There's one, what to do in case of migraine as a first aid?
Well, migraine, I also have migraine. So migraine is a very common problem. What 10% of people will be having migraine. So it's not a first aid, it is basically treating the migraine. So you take a tablet, you can try with paracetamol tablet, 2 tablets you can take in adults and see the response. It depends on the person response to a tablet. Some person do respond to paracetamol only. Some person require addition of naproxen. Some people require something else also in terms of opioids like tramadol. So it depends on individual persons how he can manage the migraine headache. So it's not a first aid, I would say it's a treatment per se.
Right, sir. So we have a compliment, I believe, it is from Jayanta Burman. We agree to this. A good topic for the students and the faculties as well. That's nice.
Thank you.
One more thing I would like to ask you about insect bite.
Mhm.
insect bite. I mean, that's
Mhm.
quite a nuisance in some places. So what are the first aid materials that we can keep ready for use at home? So if you could elaborate on that kindly.
Well, one is our antihistamine syrup or tablet, like cetirizine tablet is there, fexofenadine is there, or even the older ones, phenyramine may be there. The second thing is to keep some calamine lotion, which can be applied locally. And the third thing is, in case you can have the auto injector of epinephrine. If the person develops anaphylaxis to that can be given to the person. Otherwise, most often the simple antihistamines and painkillers would do.
Sir, we don't see any more new questions here. Anybody has any questions you could ask? Yes, ma'am, please.
There was one question I have seen that how to recognize vertigo and what emergency treatment to be done.
Well, vertigo, if it is very acute in onset, it happens within seconds to minutes. It can occur because of ear problem, can occur because of brain problem. So in the pre-hospital setting, as a first, it is difficult to recognize whether this is because of a benign cause or because of brain cause. So I would suggest all patients with acute onset of vertigo should go to the hospital to exclude brain stroke particularly. Because as a first aid, it is really difficult to exclude brain stroke in a patient with acute onset of vertigo.
Thank you.
Yes, anybody would like to ask? I think instead of writing on the chat box, we could have a lively discussion on things. If anybody has any other questions, please come up. Okay, now there's one here. How would you deal with a bleeding ear?
Bleeding, you should not pack, number one. Don't pack the ear, because this may increase the blood pressure inside the ear, and this may rupture the tympanic membrane inside. So let it bleed in the sense that there no harm in let it bleed. The only thing is that if it is following the head injury, then it indicates this is severe head injury, and patient must be taken to a hospital immediately.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for your patient answering of all these questions. Some of the questions have been quite basic, but still you've elaborated them so well. I mean, it's helped us in refreshing all our knowledge. Oh yeah, we have one more question here. Which part of the body is most easily affected due to hypothermia?
Well, most easily affected is the peripheral parts of the body, like the toes and the fingers. But most important is the heart and the brain.
What is the temperature below which we can say that it's going to be really critical for the person in case of hypothermia?
Yeah, less than 32 degrees Celsius will be really, less than 30 degrees is critical, but less than 32 is also important. Important thing about hypothermia is that do not stop resuscitation, the CPR part, until more help arrives or you get exhausted. Your patients who are hypothermic, they can be revived even after several hours of CPR.
So I think we have this last question here. So in case of sinusitis or in case of blockage of the nose, especially during the night, it's really tough to sleep. In that, if we have no medicine with us, is there first aid to treat for the relief?
Well, you can do the saline goggles. At least saline warm goggles can be done to relieve this stuffiness in the nose and in the sinuses.
Yes, sir, we have covered almost everything, all the whole spectrum, as I've said, you've already covered. If there are, one more question, just this last one. What are the first aid in case of any person contact with thunderstorm? Maybe electrocution.
Maybe thunderstorm means lightning, probably lightning injuries.
Lightning, probably, yes.
Yeah, lightning injury in contrast to electrical injuries are not really, the patient does not get become live like in electrical injury because patient remains stuck to the socket. here, after the lightning goes away within milliseconds, the person would not be really having any electricity in him. So you can easily touch him. You can easily do the CPR if required. So whatever is required, you can do it at that point of time. There's no kind of contraindication to do anything. So lightning just comes and goes away. That's all.